Hello everybody, enjoying Marvel Rivals? I sure am, along with a whole bunch of people, and I am having a blast as a strategist main. But even though we are having fun, there are still some sore spots being found by the general player base that need to be shared with netties. The way to do so is by throwing at them lots and lots of feedback, and then wait for however long it takes for them to address them. That is why I decided for my first video of the year to be about doing my best to explain feedback and how it relates to the development pipeline. So to quickly dive into it, what is feedback? Feedback is your thoughts in regard to what you just experienced. In the context of gaming, it can range from sharing your thoughts throughout social media to creating a whole video about it. They usually talk about the things they liked, disliked, and sometimes throw in some ideas on how they could be improved. But other times it is all about venting their frustrations with whatever they are playing. This is what sets apart good feedback from bad feedback. Good feedback gives information about what was liked or disliked with as many details as possible. An example would look something like, Luna slows ultimate is way too strong. Not only does it heal a crazy amount, but it also boosts damage. It heals so much that it negates the sustained damage of other ultimates. The purpose of this example is to show that feedback should be focused on a core idea and it should send a clear message on what the author thinks about as well as what they would want changed. Community managers need this because the information being shared isn't sent directly to the developers. Rather, it goes through them first before they forward it to whatever team needs to receive it. That is why what is considered bad feedback are general complaints of the game being played, not giving any indications of what are the pain points or what is that the experience is lacking. An example would look like,
I hate Luna Snow. This Mariah Carey wannabe is annoying and I hate her for her growth every time she freezes me.
Aside from showing their distaste of that character, this information is not specific enough, so it's kinda useless for a community manager since it doesn't give any indication of what they don't like about her in the first place. I say kinda useless because at least it can serve as an indicator of the overall sentiment towards the game and its components. Should there be enough complaints about a particular part of the game for it to form a notable trend, then they can at least report that there is some underperformance that would need to be monitored. That is why it is of utmost importance that feedback be shared respectfully, since community managers are the connection between the player base and the developers. So the better this connection is, the more likely it is for any game to thrive. But it doesn't happen quickly, which leads to the second most important thing, which is to be patient. Addressing them can take time, even more so if it turns out to be a bigger issue than expected. It also depends on the size of the change, since it might be too big for a hotfix, being pushed into a fax or a major update. Mind you, this is not something that they do on purpose, rather it is more like game development is pretty complicated and is sometimes at the mercy of the pipeline. The development pipeline, that is. But what is it? To the best of my knowledge, it is a framework used throughout the development process that is followed in order to give it more structure and to have better task distribution. This is probably what allows teams to quickly move from one project to the next with as little overlap as the deadlines allow. The key is the steps that are part of the development pipeline and usually are as follows. Concept and design, where an idea is elaborated upon and where possible implementations are brainstormed. Here is where they figure out what fits in the game, what doesn't, and what is feasible in the time frame that you have. Development, where ideas are shaped into something tangible. It is also where problems have to be solved and pretty much any new game mechanic or feature that needs to be implemented is a new problem to be solved. Testing, where you start to see what works, what doesn't, and where trade-offs have to be considered. This is where not only do you make sure things work as intended, but where you confirm whether or not it actually fits into the game you're making. These tests reveal what gets to stay, what gets cut, and what gets sent back to the drawing board. And finally, the launch, where the game starts reaching the public and where the studio crosses their fingers so that the game gets a good reception. It is also after this set where feedback from the audience starts to trickle in. So this is a rough idea of what I think happens in a studio during the process of game development, and what will happen after feedback is received. It is why addressing them can be so slow, since they will need teams to be available to work on addressing these issues. This might be why it takes so long for an implementation to be released. To make matters slightly more complicated, sometimes these steps are measured in weeks, months, or even years. Not only would it require selecting anything that would need to make time to address the received feedback, but it must also go through the entire development process of design, development, and testing before it's pushed out. It can feel like a painfully slow process for a player base that is constantly exposed to the pain points they report while being unaware of what goes on behind the scenes. Community managers try their best to communicate the information as it becomes available to them, but being at the mercy of the pipeline means that there is only so much they can share at any given moment. In the meantime, the most they can say is, "We are looking into it." Now we take a little break to give your brain a chance to digest the information so far. In the meantime, hit that like button, as it not only helps the channel, but it also gets you a 5% bonus to not encounter Jeff on your next match. Okay, break time is over, so now I get to share with you a possibly overcomplicated example of the feedback development pipeline. We'll circle back to good old Jeff giving feedback on his very dumb ultimate. Reason number 1. He becomes untargetable on cast, meaning that it is pretty much impossible to interrupt it before it goes off. In a game where you can down most of the roster before they fully cast their ultimate, this feels like a really weird standoff for what it does. Reason number 2. 9 times out of 10, if you see the big circle of doom, you got Kirby'd. There's no room to react to it unless you so happen to be on the edge of the circle, and even then the combat flow might stop you from doing so anyways. Reason number 3. Should it catch anybody, the little abomination has the audacity to turn into a little fin that has a corresponding tiny hitbox, a movement speed boost, and bloody health regen. If you get to evade it, you have a few seconds to try hit a tiny, fast-moving, self-healing pebble that more often than not will take your team out of the map. And last but certainly not least, reason number 4 is that you are taking tick damage as you are being transported. Meaning that if you have low enough HP, you just got a respawn timer before he spits you out. Basically, this is an ultimate that does a lot, with very limited options for counterplay. Good news is that as I was finishing this script, the developers announced that they are working on some sort of rework so that players can better react to it. So that's awesome. As we wait for info on how that would go, I shall share how I would adjust it. For one thing, it needs to have some kind of drawback. I was thinking something relatively simple, a movement penalty that scales with the amount of enemies hit. In this particular case, it will be reducing the speed bonus Fin mode gives. 1 or 2 target hits slows you down a bit, with hitting max targets gets you notably slower. That way, any surviving teammate has a better chance to try and turn that shark into soup, and it makes it harder for Jeff to constantly and consistently spit everybody out of bounds. But it might also open up for some utility. They can make it so Fin mode can get faster depending on how many allies he carries. As an example, in the case of a team wipe, all respawn relatively at the same time, Jet pops ult and just carries the entire team back to the point quickly. If Jet happens to hit both teammates and enemies, the movement penalty should obviously take priority. Okay, feedback portion over. Now we shall go with what would possibly happen development wise, and we follow the same development pipeline. First, we have concept and design, where the corresponding team will take a look at what is being said about Jeff's ultimate, see what can be tweaked, maybe consider the suggestions being shared, to ultimately decide what is feasible within their expectations of what they want the game to be. After their brainstorming session concludes, they push the end result towards the development step. This can be the most time-consuming step, since this is where the programming takes place, among other things, and how long it takes will depend on the adjustment being requested. That is because altering abilities sometimes lead to new problems that need to be solved, which can prolong the development time, especially when adding new functionality to existing content. It wouldn't surprise me if something as simple as increasing Jeff's speed in Fin mode breaks something in the game. But that is what the testing phase is for. Not only to find out how the adjustment will look like in practice, but to also find out if the change breaks something in the game. If things don't go so well here, they can either iterate on it through the development process, or they can rethink their concept and maybe think of something else. But if all goes well, you might see the changes being announced in some patch notes and eventually in the game. It's kinda hard to show here, but my guesstimate is that such a small change might take a month or so of work, depending on how the team operates. And as mentioned at the start, it also depends on how soon the patch where it was thrown in can be released. So while it might take less time to make some adjustment than others, how soon it is released will depend on how much time it takes to complete other tasks. And as it ends, the cycle almost certainly begins again. Once an update or patch is exposed to the audience, they will quickly express how they feel about it. People will give their feedback about what they liked, they didn't like, or share their overall sentiments towards it. It is this constant interaction between gamers, community managers, and the developers that helps in fixing what isn't working, come up with new ideas, and prolong their engagement between each other. And we have seen the benefits of this in games like Warframe, which continues on trucking as it does due to the constant communications between the community and digital streams. And it was also this feedback that led NetEase to quickly announce adjustments to Hawkeye, Hela, and Jeff. If the community and developers keep working together like this, then seeing the game last for years is very likely to happen. And that is it. Hope this clarified some things in regard to feedback and how game development works. Thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Take care. And remember kids, communicate with respect, be patient, and until his ultimate get adjusted, always turn Jeff into soup.